Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Recovery, Response and Resilience Expo, proudly brought to you by Wollondilly Shire Council, Wingecarribee Shire Council, Resilience New South Wales, and the National Recovery and Resilience Agency. My name is Kim Hill, and I am the Local Recovery Support Officer with the National Recovery and Resilience Agency.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Natalie. I'm the Community Recovery Officer at Wollondilly Shire Council.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Corinne, the Community Recovery Officer for Wingecarribee Shire Council.
We are very excited to have you join us for this virtual event from the many lands on which we meet today. I would now like to invite Melissa Weir, whom is the Aboriginal Community Development Officer with Wingecarribee Shire Council and a very proud Araku Bunjalung woman, to deliver our acknowledgement to country.
On behalf of Wingecarribee Shire Council and Wollondilly Shire Council, I would like to acknowledge the Gundungurra and Dharawal people, as they are the traditional custodians of the land on which we live and work. I acknowledge the spiritual connections to the land, waters and sky. I'd like to pay my respect to the ancestors, our elders past and present, and to the future generations. I'd also like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that are watching today. In my language, Jingiwala. Welcome.
Thank you, Melissa. We now have a message from Wollondilly Shire Council CEO, Mr. Ben Taylor, and Wingecarribee Shire Council General Manager, Lisa Miss Campbell.
Hi everyone, I'm Ben Taylor. I'm CEO for Wollondilly Shire Council. I'm very pleased to see everyone come along to this event. I hope you get a lot out of it. I've got to say, for Wollondilly Shire Council, this is extremely important for us as we support our community through all of the challenges we've had over the many years just gone. We're working closely with our friends at Wingecarribee, as well as Resilience New South Wales and the National Recovery and Resilience Agency, to support our community as they cope with the challenges of bushfires, of floods, of COVID-19, because that's what communities are all about, is coming together to support each other through times of crisis. For Wollondilly Shire Council, our role in a time of emergency is to support the combat agencies, the lead agencies, as they deal with the emergencies at hand. Now, 2 years on from the horrific Green Wattle Creek bushfires, I want to really pay tribute to those lead agencies who put their lives on the line to support our communities and support our Shire. Our role as a council is to support them and help them do their job as best they can, because they are extraordinary at what they do. We also have a lot of other support mechanisms in place. So for Council, we have the Mayoral Relief Fund, which is set up to support our community and provide that extra level of assistance. Through the Green Wattle Creek fire, Council raised over $250,000, which was directed directly to support communities on the ground and support them in their recovery from a time of immense challenge. I mean, personally, I can remember back to those days in late 2019, early 2020, and how hard it was for our community, how hard it was for the frontline firefighters, really dealing with an enormous challenge ahead of them. And still, 2 years on, our community is still recovering from the impacts of such an extraordinary crisis. For Council, we've been very active in the resilience space. So we have our Activate Wollondilly Recovery and Resilience Framework in place, which sets out our plan to support our community and also to ensure that we're prepared for the challenges that will inevitably come in the years ahead. We also have a great committee in our Recovery and Resilience Committee of community members who volunteer their time, their effort and their expertise to advise Council and to coordinate efforts efforts as well on the ground as we support our community recover from the challenges on the ground and the challenges that still exist many years after the extreme events that our communities experienced. For all of you, I hope you get a lot out of this forum. It's a really important expo and training forum for you to learn and understand, and I hope to gain the tools that you need to recover from the challenges that we've had, but also to prepare yourselves and become even more resilient for the years ahead. Lastly, I'd like to finish by thanking particularly our emergency services for all the work they've done to support our community and to keep our community safe. It's extraordinary what you do, having witnessed firsthand your passion, your dedication, your hard work and your expertise. I really want to personally thank you, and also thank you on behalf of Wollondilly Shire Council for everything you do. For all of you, I hope you enjoy the expo. I hope you enjoy the forum that's ahead of you. Make the most of it, and as you know, as always, Council's here to help, and hopefully I'll be able to see you one day soon.
Good morning and welcome to our online Bushfire Response, Recovery and Resilience Expo. My name is Miss Campbell and I am the General Manager of Wingecarribee Shire Council. Together with Wollondilly Shire Council, Resilience New South Wales and the National Recovery Resilience Agency, we're very excited to present this 3-day virtual expo. In just over a week's time, summer is set to commence, and shortly after that we will acknowledge the 2nd anniversary of the Green Wattle Creek and Moreton fires. These bushfires threatened both the Wingecarribee and Wollondilly Shires for weeks over the summer of 2019 and 2020. In the 2 years since the Black Summer fires, we've discovered that recovery is an ongoing process. Everyone's circumstance is unique, and for many people their journey towards recovery will take years. As a community, we travel together on the path towards recovery and build our resilience for future events. Whilst we hope for the best, it is important to plan for the worst, and that's where this weekend's expo is important. Over the next 3 days, you'll hear from experts about rebuilding after a natural disaster, disaster of preparedness, support services, legal aid, and much, much more. It is also an opportunity for participants to share their stories and experiences and to make new connections and contacts. This expo is part of our recovery journey. Wingecarribee Shire Council is committed to prioritising infrastructure projects and economic schemes that will help our bushfire impacted communities. We continue to implement environmental initiatives to help our landscape recovery and promote social connections to build our communities even closer together. We continue to implement recommendations from the New South Wales Bushfire Inquiry and our own independent review into the Green Wattle Creek and Moreton bushfires. We understand that recovery and building resilience is a shared journey. In closing, I would like to say a special thanks to all of the emergency, first responder, volunteer and combat agencies for all of their efforts during and since the Black Summer fires. Our role at Council is to support these lead agencies, and each time an emergency faces our Shire, it's these agencies who are at the coalface of the crisis. I urge everyone to participate as much as you feel comfortable over the next 3 days. Your experiences may well help someone else take that extra step along the road to recovery. I trust you find the expo beneficial.
Thank you for those messages. This event was scheduled to be a face-to-face event. However, due to the current COVID situation, we decided to keep everyone safe to deliver this as a virtual event. We do, however, plan to hold a face-to-face event in April of 2022, and we hope to see you all there. Please just keep an eye on Council's websites for updates in this space. Today's virtual event will be recorded so that you can come back and view it later if you wish. For today's event, you will hear from various speakers around rebuilding after a bushfire. At the end of the program, around 12:15 p.m, we will then be joined by all of our speakers as part of a panel to where you can write questions in the comments below, and then we can direct them to the relevant person to answer. If we cannot get to all the questions, please know that we will take them on notice and come back with an answer. All of the questions and answers for each day will be listed on Council's Expo webpage. You will also find on that Expo webpage links to various agencies, along with video content messages and links to useful information.
I would now like to welcome our first speaker, Jodie from Jodie Dang Architect. Jodie will be covering the following topics: what is Architect Assist, how it was formed and the services that they provide, building material for bush-prone areas. Jodie has spoken for Wollondilly before. We're very excited to have Jodie back again today. Jodie has over 10 years experience in architecture. Jodie knew that sustainability was going to play a major part in the roles and the projects that she pursued in her career. Focusing on small to medium-sized projects, Jodie has gained a strong reputation in good sustainable design in New South Wales. Jodie wishes to continue sharing her knowledge and experience in architecture and help each of her clients to realise their dream build through creating responsive and sustainable architecture. Welcome, Jodie.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen. Hi everyone, thank you for attending today. My name is Jodie and today I'm here to represent Architect Assist. I'll start my talk today explaining what is Architect Assist, who I am, what I could offer, and then we'll move into material selection to bushfire prone areas. So Architect Assist was an initiative started by around 600 architects in response to the devastation of the bushfires. Later on, we extended our services to all natural disasters. So Architect Assist is supported by the Australian Institutes of Architects, and everyone who signed up to offer assistance needs to be a registered architect. In order to request for assistance, you could visit the website and click on the tab Request for Assistance. From the directory, you could choose from a range of architects and architecture studios which you think best suits your needs. It is good to note that providers closer to the disaster zones are usually much more popular, and that further away architects, like more city-based ones, are usually more readily available. You could choose directly and contact the architecture studio directly, or you could give them a call. Each studio and each architect offers a different range of services. So you actually need to discuss what you would like to do, and then the architect and the architecture studios would come to an agreement of what assistance they will offer you. So it could vary from just simple advice all the way to the full scopes of design. In order for my services, I offer from basic simple design advice all the way to helping you put in a development application to start building your new home. You could contact me directly via my website or via email, and my number is also on my website if you'd like to call me directly. On the Architect Assist website, there's also a lot of links and information you could access to help you rebuild. This includes building codes, sustainable guidelines, and other necessary resources that you think will be helpful. So just a little bit about myself, which was already covered. I'm a city-based architect. I'm a certified passive house designer, which means I'm certified to design low energy and self-sustaining housing. So these days, when we start to construct homes, we have an expected lifespan of 50 years for that home. And in that time, they may be subjected to multiple bushfires. There are 5 ways which impacts a building: smoke, wind, ember attack, radiant heat, and direct flame contact. So many of you may have been given a BAL rating for your area. The BAL rating is a construction guide for structures to withstand heat and embers attacks during a bushfire. Anything more than BAL 29, which is this area, BAL 40 to BAL flame zone, we are designing to allow our houses to withstand ember attacks and collapsing in extreme heat. I'm going to go through how these 5 elements are going to impact our design thinking and construction. With wind during a bushfire, the winds could go up to 200 kilometers per hour, which is close to a category 4 cyclone. So when we are designing, we need to think about how big our windows are, because usually we want expansive windows to capture the views of the landscape. But at the same time, during these bushfires, the windows, the bigger the windows, the more they'll buckle and crack and ultimately break. With embers are small pieces of wood and bark carried by the wind to ignite a house. It accounts for 75% of damages caused by bushfires. For structures in the BAL 29 and over, we usually are designing houses to prevent embers flying into our home. We're avoiding small gaps in our structure to allow the embers to come in and basically burn the house from inside out. With extreme heat, our structure needs to be able to sustain the extreme heat, especially in the bushfire. When the bushfire comes and your neighbor unfortunately gets ignited, your house would also get in contact with the radiant heat caused by your neighbor and the direct impact of the flames. Today, I'll be going through the highest building in the highest BAL rating, which is BAL flame zone. So we'll go through the walls, windows, floor, decking, and roof. One of the biggest considerations we need to consider is following the Australian Standards 3939/2018 construction of buildings in bushfire prone areas. And this guide will kind of advise us on which building materials were allowed and all those building standing codes that I need to adhere to. So for external walls, it states that all external walls has to be non-combustible and a minimum thickness of 90 millimeters. So this really does limit our structural selection to either brick or concrete. If we want to use lightweight materials, that is available as a choice, but it is quite complicated to decode what is allowed in the Australian standard. So it is best to consult your architect or fire consultant before you start building and selecting your materials. All floors and deckings in a BAL flame zone area has to be completely enclosed. So this does away with all timber decking as it allows small gaps for embers and grass fires to seep through to the house. The most important code to look for when you're selecting tiles as well is it doesn't conform with AS 1530, which is a non-combustible and bushfire compliant material. So with your windows in a BAL flame zone and BAL 40, all windows needs to be screened so the house can be completely closed off during a bushfire. You could either go for external metal window shutters or you could go for a perforated mesh window screen. You can't just go off and choose any perforated metal screen. The mesh needs to have a maximum aperture of 2 millimeters and made out of corrosion resistant steel. So with all these rules in place, it feels like your building needs to be an enclosed fortress. I will now show you an example of a home built in a BAL flame zone. So this is a house, this is a 2-bedroom house, approximately 85 square meters, and it is built in the Blue Mountains in the Melagong Valley. And this is an example done by Anderson Architecture. So the entire construction the entire structural frame is actually concrete to comply with Bell FZ. And you kind of see how close it is to all the trees and the grassland around it. The construction is also slab on ground, so that allows embers and grass fire not to be able to penetrate the floor during a bushfire. The design of the concrete is then cladded in basically timber composite material. So it's not actually timber, it's a modified composite timber, which is a non-combustible material. And the decking, which looks like timber, is also a composite, which is non-combustible. So there are varieties of different materials that you could use that is not just brick and concrete to give the entire design a little bit more lighter feel and more inset into the landscape. All the windows on the facade are rated Bell 40. And then additionally, they have metal screens, which allows all the windows and the house to be completely enclosed off during a bushfire. So this allows the house to capture the views when there's no bushfire and to enjoy the beautiful landscape, but it also allows it to respond to the bushfires and allow it to comply with Bell FZ and have the entire house completely enclosed. Timber is allowed to be used, but only for the interiors. And that allows the house to be softened up and you could use it for shelving units and internal cladding. The floors, however, for Bell FZ still needs to be either mainly tiles. In this case, the design went for polished concrete. So that's the end of my talk today. You could contact me directly if you would like to have more information about building in bushfire prone areas. And I would like to finish off by thanking Wollondilly Council and Wingecarribee Council for having me today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jodie. That was such an interesting presentation. I definitely learned that, and that house was incredible. If anyone has any questions for Jodie, please type them into the chat. We will have a question and answer time later on this afternoon for all those there. Next up, we'd like to introduce the planners from both Wollondilly and Wingecarribee Shire Council. Our planners today will discuss rebuilding after a disaster and what you need to know. Also, how council is here to support you in that process. Apologies, everybody. The computer restarted just before we just reopened the presentation. Sorry, everybody.
sorry about that. Yeah, so this is the map that shows the extent of the bushfire, and it more or less covers more than 50% of Wollondilly, as well as neighbouring councils. So,
in the aftermath of the bushfire event, council nominated. Council nominated us as the Bushfire Recovery Office contacts in the Planning Directorate for all customers' inquiries requiring assistance in regard to the rebuild process. This was set up so that bushfire victims had the same contact from start to finish when interacting with council during the rebuilding phase. This service remains open to this day, and customers are invited to contact council if they require any form of assistance.
So the first part of the planning approval process, the rebuild, you need to obtain development consent from council, the same as you would for any other normal development. However, council resolved that all applications required for rebuild developments destroyed by the bushfire events would not incur any assessment fees, and we would try as best as we could to prioritise those. Preparing a DA for council's review is a specialist task. Therefore, we recommend that customers engage the services of relevant professionals such as JAS people, planning consultants and the like. Jodie's presentation before us was all about Architects Assist. So we've put that link there, and they help with providing professional services to help and support those affected by the natural disasters and bushfire events.
In addition to engaging professionals to assist in the preparation of the required development application, council's advice is that one of the most important professionals to engage is a BPAT accredited bushfire consultant. The bushfire consultant will be able to help you determine your bushfire attack level, help you during the construction process, and advise you in regard to ongoing bushfire maintenance and survival plans. The Fire Protection Association provides a list of accredited practitioners, that being accredited bushfire consultants, on their website, so you can be sure to engage a qualified and experienced consultant. And there, the link to the relevant page is attached.
We also engage the New South Wales Rural Fire Service in our assessments. So during the assessment period for development applications for rebuilds, council will refer the applications to the Rural Fire Service for their review and advice to make sure that the rebuild complies with all the relevant legislation, such as their document planning for bushfire protection, as well as all the current industry best practices. It's very important that to ensure everything is correct at the DA stage, to ensure the rebuild runs smoothly and that the proposal will be adequately protected and built correctly in line with the current legislation.
In response to the bushfire events, the New South Wales Government also introduced the New South Wales Rural Fire Service 2019-2020 Bushfire Rebuilding Compliance Scheme, which is known as BOW Capping Concession. In summary, this allows owners of the rebuilding to build to a lower bushfire attack level, provided other offset measures are implemented during the rebuild, which could substantially reduce the financial cost for the rebuild. Councils have in support of this policy, and we act with the support of the New South Wales Rural Fire Service. You're best advised to engage a bushfire consultant and liaise with New South Wales Rural Fire Service if you intend to explore this rebuilding option using the BOW capping.
So once you've obtained approval from council to rebuild, prior to starting any of the building works, you need to obtain a construction certificate from either council or an accredited certifier. Council provides this expert service, which is also free of charge for bushfire victims. If you nominate council as your principal certifier, we'll inspect the rebuild at mandatory stages to ensure compliance with your approval. Council will also require the nominated bushfire consultant to inspect the rebuild at certain stages of construction with our council officers to ensure compliance with the bushfire protection construction measures throughout.
Upon completion of the rebuild and prior to you moving in, you will need to obtain an occupation certificate from your principal certifier. As advised, Council provides this service free of charge for all building victims. Prior to issuing the occupation certificate, we will inspect to ensure the building is safe to occupy and to ensure that it conforms with all the bushfire protection measures that have been required and that they are correctly installed. Similar to the construction process, Council require your nominated bushfire consultant to inspect the rebuild once completed to ensure compliance with the bushfire protection construction measures that have been stated by the relevant consultant.
So ongoing maintenance. So even with a brand new rebuilt home, once you've moved in, it's very important to ensure that a bushfire survival plan, is created to ensure all the required bushfire protection measures are maintained as intended. Examples of these measures include ensuring the curtilage of the rebuild remains cleared and maintained, ensuring bushfire water supplies are full, access driveways are maintained, and gutters are cleaned regularly.
Council staff are dedicated to supporting the bushfire and disaster victims wherever we can. The main contacts if you have inquiries are Natalie McCullen, which is Council's Community Recovery Officer, myself, Team Leader of Building Approvals and Certification, Jake Abrahams is one of our Senior Building Surveyors, and Kim Hill. Kim is the Recovery Support Officer for Wollondilly and Wingecarribee from the National Recovery and Resilience Agency.
And lastly, information that Council's provided in our Activate Wollondilly long-term community recovery and resilience plan. That's on our website, and that has everything you need to know in regards to bushfire and disaster recovery. And that's the end of our presentation, and we can take questions now, but probably later at the end of the day. Yeah, so no worries.
Thanks so much, Stephen and Jake. So yeah, we did have a few technical issues there at the start. So sorry, everybody, but the presentation will be available for people to view later. So if anybody has any questions for the planners, and please note we also have the Wingecarribee planners on board as well. It's just that they were having a few technical issues getting on board. So any questions, please type them into the chat, and then we can come back to those for our panel later on at about 12:15 today. Thank you, boys.
Just be able to get the Wingecarribee planners online, so we're just going to hand over to them now. We're just setting them up to present.
Thanks, Nat.
So just while we're doing that too, just to add, as Stephen and Jake mentioned, that there's a big team of us here at Council that are happy to support when it comes to rebuilding after disaster. So as Stephen and Jake mentioned, feel free to get in touch with any of us at any time. We'll definitely help you, walk you through that process wherever we can, and we try and work together as a team as much as we can through that process. So there's a lot of support here within Council to help those rebuilds happen. So thank you both so much. We also have a really great rebuilding after bushfire document that has just been finalised with our graphic designers, that has been developed in collaboration with our planners and certifiers with the NRRA. So we'll be uploading that to our website as well in the Expo content. So we've just had Ross from Wingecarribee Shire Council join us. So Ross, if we can hand over to you just to touch on the rebuild and planning supports available through Wingecarribee Shire Council, that would be great.
Hello, my name is Ross Jodie. I'm the Acting Coordinator of Certification at Wingecarribee. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and see you.
Oh, good. Okay. Sorry, we're having a little bit of technical problem. We haven't been able to get up our presentation, but we'll send that through to the attendees a bit later. I'm pretty much Wingecarribee has a similar policy to Wollondilly in that any applications that are provided to or submitted to us do not incur any fees, and they do get a priority listing for assessment and go through the similar processes. What was explained for Wollondilly there, being referred to RFS and any of the other associated state government sections that are required to go to. But that'll be all on our handout when it comes through shortly.
Thanks so much, Ross. We'll attach all that information.
So
We'll attach all that information to the content for people to have access to via both council websites. So, and then again, if people have any questions, please type them in the comments so that we can come back to those for you to get some answers.
Thanks, Kim.
So just checking before I move along to our next guest speaker, is that everything from both sides for the planners for both councils? Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you hear me, Kim?
Yes, I can.
Oh, so there we go. I'm Nancy. I'm the acting manager for planning, certification and compliance. I just wanted to reiterate what Ross says and how seriously we've been taking bushfire resilience in our Shire. Our director, Jeff King, is very keen to help people in the Shire with this issue. We've had a number of sessions, help sessions throughout the Shire to try and help our community. And we've tried to put as much on the website in the past as we could during the worst of the fires. We were very, very busy. As everybody was, I think, trying to, has it just dropped out? I think it has.
No, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. That's great, thank you. Yeah, I'm not sure what happened with my link, but it wasn't working very well. There we go, I think it says. Hello, that works now normally, yeah. As I was saying, we do have a number of.
As I was just saying, we do have a number of resources already on the website that will be improving over time. We have recently improved our website, but it's a bit of a work in progress. We've actually been getting some help from Wollondilly, which is great. So thank you so much, the team at Wollondilly. We're obviously going through a lot locally, as you did with this issue. We've tried to bring in things, as Ross mentioned, around free fees. Can you turn your sound off, Ross? Thanks. Free fees, which covers everything, not just the DA fee specifically, but associated fees for those in recovery, to try and help people, and also a team that will specifically look after and concierge those applicants when they put their applications in, to try and fast track them, just I think in the same way that Wollondilly has. So we're doing what we can to try and help as best we can, but there'll be more to come in this space, certainly. Sorry, we have an echo this end. Ross, can you turn your sound off, please?
I'm unmuted.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you so much. As we said, we'll have everything available on the council's website for people to access via both presentations. So sorry, there was a few IT issues, the joys of today's technology. So we'll move along now to our next guest speaker. So I would like to introduce Catherine. So Catherine Gorrie is with the Bushfire Consulting Service. Catherine is the Managing Director of the Bushfire Consulting Service, which she established in 2010, holding bushfire planning and design accredited practitioner. Catherine is a qualified environmental health and building surveyor with over 16 years local government experience, most recently with Blue Mountains City Council as a Senior Development Assessment Officer and Building Certifier. Catherine is also the Managing Director of the registered training organisation Building Upskills and has designed and implemented the Swimming Pool Inspector course as a registration pathway for New South Wales swimming pool inspectors for the Department of Fair Trading, formerly the Building Professionals Board. Catherine has provided bushfire seminars in partnership with the Fire Protection Association and Western Australia Building Commission, and delivers her own bushfire seminars to council officers, building certifiers and architects, and in partnership with the Master Builders Association, continuing professional development program for builders and in-house consulting for CPD for architects. Catherine has actively contributed to the Technical Advisory Committee 20 Bushfire Safety of the Fire Protection Association of Australia for more than 7 years and is a member of the Western Sydney University External Advisory Committee, Built Environment and the former Planning for Bushfire Protection Implementation Group. Welcome, Catherine, and thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks, Kim. So I'm expecting my video to start playing. Yeah, thank you. Hi, my name is Catherine Gorrie, and today I'm talking about the role of bushfire consultants and what they can bring to your development process. I'm a bushfire consultant and building surveyor and worked for 16 years in local government doing assessments of applications for development as well as construction inspections. I worked for 7 years at Blue Mountains Council and I developed a particular interest in bushfire, as you can imagine, and studied for a graduate diploma in bushfire planning and design at the University of Western Sydney, graduating in 2010. I then applied for and received accreditation as a recognised bushfire consultant. Bushfires are part of life in Australia. They're influenced by many factors, including warm and dry conditions, extreme heat, strong winds and low humidity, housing design and materials, fuel loads and their management. Climate change is increasing bushfires throughout Australia, and this has resulted in a higher number of days of high or extreme fire risk over the last few decades. Climate change also brings an extension of the fire season. We can still implement better land management, learn from the techniques and past practices of Indigenous fire management principles, and continue research into our changing climate and bushfire behaviour, and aim to avoid the catastrophic loss of life that has occurred in the past. And never more so than the most recent bushfire season. There are a number of strategies set in place by the government to manage bushfires in New South Wales, such as fire prevention, in other words, doing something about arsonists, warning systems, community preparedness, prescribed burning, monitoring and maintenance, and using the planning and development control system to minimise high-risk development on bushfire-prone land. Today I'm only talking about the measures that are in place to increase the bushfire resilience of housing stock at the development assessment stage. Your local council is responsible for preparing bushfire-prone land maps for their council area. The Commissioner of the New South Wales Rural Fire bushfire prone. Your local council can supply you with a section 10.7.2 and 5 planning certificate, which will confirm whether your property is on bushfire prone land. But you can also find out if your property is on bushfire prone land by searching the New South Wales planning portal. It's really important to understand that the map can't show you the bushfire risk applicable to your property, which is worked out individually for each building project by a bushfire consultant or the council. It's easy to find out if the land is bushfire prone by going to the New South Wales planning portal. This fairly recent resource has got a lot of great information about all land in New South Wales. So go to the browser and follow the prompts until you find the New South Wales planning portal. Click on Find a Property. Just randomly, I'm going to search for 9 Glenrock Close, Picton. So you start typing in the address and it auto-fills once enough information is entered. So you select that property from the drop-down list. So when the property comes up, some layers are already active, which is usually the zoning layer. So there's a little icon there to unselect all the layers, so that when we get to the bushfire prone land map, it's clear. So scroll down the menu on the left-hand side until you see the word hazard. Click on that to expand the menu. Then select bushfire prone land map. Now you can see the bushfire prone land map around this property. We can make a few little adjustments to this website to make it easier to read. This is what I normally do. So I'm going to click on the bushfire prone land map layer and make it a little bit more transparent. And then on the bottom on the right hand side, you can select an aerial map to see under it. So this just shows you how the red layer is the bushland. The yellow layer around it is generally 100 metres of buffer. So anything in that buffer or the red layer is bushfire prone land. It is not enough to know that the land is bushfire prone. You also need to gain an understanding of the bushfire attack level and its implications for your new works. This might be about the cost of the building works, but also the materials that you can use. It is important to understand the bushfire attack level for the location of the new work at the planning stage. A complying development can only go ahead with a maximum bushfire attack level of 29. BAL 40 and BAL flame zone require a development application to council. If the BAL is 40 or flame zone, you will not be able to have a granny flat, a family daycare, Airbnb, or similar development types. The maximum bushfire attack level for these type of developments is BAL 29. The method for determining the bushfire attack level is set out in the New South Wales Rural Fire Service document called Planning for Bushfire Protection 2019. The calculations are made from the fire danger index for the locality, the type of bushland vegetation, the slope of the land underneath the bushland, and the distance of the new work from the bushland. Putting all these things together gives us an understanding of how bushfire might behave in relation to your site. There are 6 bushfire attack levels ranging from low through increasing risk to BAL flame zone. The bushfire attack level is a measurement of the severity of a building's potential exposure to ember attack, radiant heat, and direct flame contact. You can find a list of accredited bushfire consultants by visiting the Bushfire Protection Association of Australia or the Fire Protection Association of Australia. Like any other industry, ask for recommendations from people you know. A bushfire consultant will come to your site, and take photographs and measurements around the site, and wherever physically possible, out to 100 metres into the bushland causing the hazard. The bail must be determined by an accredited bushfire consultant or the council. Your bushfire consultant can bring many years of expertise to your project, negotiate with the RFS and council on your behalf to get the best result for your site. They can also help work with ecological factors that may impact your site. This means providing you with the most appropriate bushfire attack level for your situation. They can go on to help you choose appropriate building materials and check in on your works as they progress to ensure bushfire measures are in line with the development consent conditions. Once assessed, your new works will have one of the 6 bushfire attack levels applied. The lower bushfire attack levels from 12.5 through to 29 mainly deal with Ember attack. So measures applied to your building works are designed to keep embers out of the building. The higher BALs, being BAL 40 and flame zone, also deal with ember attack, but radiant heat effects as well. So this means that it's anticipated that flame may contact your house or building work. So the building materials themselves need to be able to resist the effects of this heat. Once the BAL is established, you'll be referred to AS 3959 for the construction requirements for each BAL. The components that are addressed in AS 3959 are all of the external building elements, from the subfloor to the walls, the glazing, through to the roof, verandas and decks. So each bushfire attack level has its own set of construction requirements through the standard. There's also a general section at the beginning of the standard which applies to every bushfire attack level. In New South Wales, planning for bushfire protection overrides some of the requirements of the standard. You can find these from Part 7.5 of Planning for Bushfire Protection 2019. It's also a legislative requirement that each development must satisfy the objectives of Planning for Bushfire Protection 2019. This Rural Fire Service document can be downloaded from the RFS website. These bushfire protection measures include asset protection zones, the construction standards and design, gaining access to the property, having sufficient water and utilities to facilitate firefighting activities, having landscaping that is consistent with the asset protection zone, and having some emergency management practices in place, which depends on the development type. So, for example, emergency management arrangements are different for example, schools than they are for single dwellings. Your bushfire consultant makes an assessment of this in their bushfire report. Some of the reasons for using an accredited bushfire consultant include getting the most accurate bushfire attack level for your new works. Your bushfire consultant will be familiar with views of the RFS and Council on the interpretation of Planning for Bushfire Protection 2019, as well as Australian Standard 3959. We will also aim to find the safest position on your site for the new works in cases where there is a choice of positions. We will try to reduce the bushfire attack level if it's possible, and can suggest ways that this might be achieved, for example, redesigning the project if possible, or minimising the hazard also if possible. We can also assist you find a better bushfire protection outcome where the risk is very high and the works are very minor. Using an accredited bushfire consultant gives confidence that you're dealing with an accredited and insured person who's an expert in their field. We can also find an alternate solution sometimes for more unusual or challenging situations. This photograph is from a dwelling that we worked on in Conjola Park, which was affected by the bushfires on New Year's Eve of 2020. We worked with the builder and owner to make sure that the building was constructed in accordance with the development consent, which was a mixture of flame zone and 40. And of the many buildings that perished in the fire on that day, this one resisted the bushfire attack and remained standing with only very slight damage. We hope to be able to help you with your next bushfire-prone land project.
Thank you very much, Catherine. That was a really fantastic video. I think for people that are not only rebuilding after disaster, but just building a new house, all the acronyms and the abbreviations and things can be so overwhelming. So that presentation was really great. And I think the upcoming presentations are really going to assist as well, just to break down some of that overwhelming nature of when we look at this process, because there are so many people out there who can support you through that process. So thank you very much, Catherine, and I look forward. I'm sure you're going to have a lot of questions in the panel at the end. So our next presentation is a joint presentation from Lisa Chiu from the New South Wales Rural Fire Service and Lew Short from Black Ash. They'll be talking to us today about bushfire attack levels, or BAL ratings, as we've heard, and how they both work together in this space to help the community. Lisa is a supervisor, development planning and policy for the New South Wales Rural Fire Service's Built and Natural Environment Directorate. In her role, she primarily oversees development and administration of building, bushfire protection and associated land use policy related documents and processes for New South Wales, as well as work in the related strategic planning space. Since coming to the New South Wales Rural Fire Service, Lisa has overseen significant reforms in associated processes and programs, with an emphasis on customer service delivery, improved efficiencies and outcomes, and engagement with relevant stakeholders. Prior to her current role, Lisa worked in various roles at the then State Forest of New South Wales in areas that involve bushfire, and has also served in leadership positions internationally and recognised volunteer organisations. Lew from Black Ash is a highly regarded expert in bushfire planning and design, with over 20 years experience in local government, the private sector and state government. Lew led the development, assessment and planning for bushfire protection for the New South Wales Rural Fire Service at a state level. He was responsible for the assessment of over 80,000 development applications in bushfire-prone areas and bushfire-prone mapping for New South Wales. Lew has extensive experience providing national leadership in building community resilience. Lew's technical expertise is in bushfire consequence management, risk assessment and mitigation, and specifically the planning and design of new developments in high bushfire risk areas to comply with legislative and planning requirements. Lew is an expert in designing solutions for complex and challenging projects where environmental, engineering, or design constraints need consideration when planning for bushfire. Lew has a deep operational understanding of how fire works in the Australian landscape. He has multifaceted insight into how governments respond to this threat. Lew provides unique strategies to comply with regulatory requirements and safety outcomes. Lew's skills lie in developing strong working relationships with clients, providing innovative solutions and clear communication to deliver optimum project outcomes. Lew's expertise lies in understanding the complexity of building in bushfire-prone areas and helping clients navigate this challenging space. Some of our community members might be familiar with Black Ash, as they've been assisting residents who are rebuilding after fire to obtain their bushfire attack level assessment. So thank you to Lisa and Lew, and I'm just going to set you both up as panelists. Lew, I might ask you to start first, if that's okay. We're just waiting for Lisa to jump online. So Lew, if I can hand over to you to start the presentation, and then Lisa, I'll ask you to present after Lew.
Of course. Bear with me for 2 seconds. Okay, have you got me there?
Yes, we do. All good to go, Lew. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Look, a lot of this has been covered by other presenters this morning, so I think I'm trying to just pull together various elements and give a couple of examples. And I'm not going to read through everything, and I'll just paraphrase some of the important points that people can take away. The important thing is that all new development in bushfire-prone areas across New South Wales have to comply or consider these planning for bushfire protection standards. So it's not just residential houses, it's aged care, hospitals, schools, the whole gamut of development across bushfire areas has got to consider this to increase resilience of communities. Planning for bushfire protection is called up in legislation. So it's actually a legal document, and the requirement for infill development, so existing houses, alterations and additions, rebuilds after fire and things like that, it is really to try and respect people's choice as to where they live and providing a balanced approach to risk. So that there's different ways and different considerations in getting outcomes for bushfire that I'll run through in a couple of minutes. This is all bound up in the National Construction Code. And again, I'm not going to get all sort of legal and things like that, but it's not just stuff that council or consultants or the Rural Fire Service make up. There's actually a national system that all of this sits within. There's the National Construction Standards that give you the different bushfire attack levels. So this is not stuff that is just being made up as a New South Wales specific response to bushfires or anything like that. So there's a bigger picture here that New South Wales sits within. So the national standard, which gives you the bushfire attack levels, is an accepted way of coming up with accepted practice, accepted standards, what works, what's being considered by, through various bushfires and responses to fires as what is going to give a degree of resilience to a structure during the impact of a fire and while it passes. The important thing to remember with the standard is that even though you might be building to a specific bushfire attack level, it's not a guarantee that the structure is going to withstand the impact and the fire. So it's designed to actually, for the fire to come up to the house to impact it, and then for the fire to actually pass through and go beyond. And then the house might catch fire, but the people can, if they're in the house, can then move out on the dirt ground or something like that. So technically, if a house still gets damaged or burns down, but the people have been saved, the standard and the national framework has worked. When we start looking at infill houses, so existing houses, alterations and additions, new houses, rebuilds after fire and things like that, it's complex because there's existing infrastructure in place, the roads, the power, the water, all of these things that you might consider in a new area are already there. So you can have different people come up with, looking at the same problem of what's the bushfire attack level, that might come up with different solutions. And there's a framework around that. So within planning for bushfire protection, there are these bushfire protection measures. So six of these things. And the way that we look at them is they're levers. What can you use to try and get the best outcome you can for the site? And for existing houses, it's mainly around, and Catherine mentioned this, that the landscaping and asset protection zones, your building construction and design. So what's the interplay of these things that actually lead to the risk or the bushfire attack at a structure? So your other things like your access, your water supply and utilities, these pieces down here are already in place for existing houses. And then the emergency management arrangements are more the operational response of fire authorities, the emergency management arrangements for vulnerable communities like schools and hospitals and things like that, where you have quite detailed emergency management plans and evacuation plans. So all of these things come together to say, right, this is the risk and this is how you might consider it. And this is what you might do to change or alter that risk in some way. For the infill houses, and there's a couple of key words here that I've highlighted, that to look at getting better outcomes. So for existing houses, for alterations and additions, new houses, what can you do to provide defendable space? What is a better bushfire outcome? And this is where people either with council, the Royal Fire Service consultants that actually can provide the advice on, you know, what's the level of risk and what things can you reasonably do to mitigate or reduce that risk. So the risk base is very much at play. Maintaining all of your requirements with your own land, so you're not actually passing an obligation or responsibility onto an adjoining landholder. Although managed land, golf courses, parks, you know, your neighbours' managed land could be considered as part of an asset protection zone. And looking at what you can do for existing dwellings to increase the resilience and the durability of those buildings to a fire that might come through. Catherine mentioned compliant development, so I won't go through this very quickly. The main thing is it's only for infill residential development. You can only do a compliant development for the lower level risks of BAL low, 12.5, BAL 19 or 29. I didn't actually put that in. But they've got to be recognised by the Royal Fire Service as a suitably qualified consultant or a suitably qualified person if council are doing those things. And then if you're in the higher risk areas of BAL 40 or flame zone, you've got to do a formal development application and a bushfire hazard assessment report. So there's a format that the Royal Fire Service need documentation to be provided, and you can provide acceptable solutions or performance-based approaches in there. What I thought I would do is just step through a couple of examples here. And these are a couple of tables from Planning for Bushfire Protection. So there's different fire dangers across the state that we would consider. So down in the alpine areas, you've got this fire danger index of 50. Some of the coastal areas and out west are a higher fire danger index of 80. And then you've got some of the coastal areas, which is in the neck of the woods we're talking now, Sydney and sort of coastal areas, which is a fire danger index of 100. So that sort of tells us that this is where we need to start thinking about what's the level of risk and how we work it through. So I'll step through a sort of procedurally how you do it. So you look at the slope, what's the slope underneath the hazard? So it's what's actually going to burn and what's going to be presenting a hazard to the structure. So that gets you into this ballpark down here of 5 to 10 degrees downslope, so away from the structure. What's the sort of vegetation that you're looking at? So there's a couple of different vegetation types that are separated out for the acceptable solutions. And this one might, and most of the areas around Sydney are forest. So, you know, you're in forest vegetation, you've got a 5 to 10 degree slope. Then you look at what's the distance of the structure from the actual unmanaged vegetation. So in this circumstance, I've said, look, it's somewhere between 36 and 49 metres. So that's the actual physical separation of the building. Then you combine all of these things through here. So your 5 to 10 degree slope, your forest vegetation, your separation distance, and that gives you the bushfire attack level. And that's been spoken about a number of times this morning of what is the BAL, and we've seen different images of what that actually looks like. So that's how you go through what a bushfire attack level is. In terms of what that might look like, there's a couple of different sites here. So you'd combine the vegetation and slope out through here. You look at a house, so here's the plans, and you say, right, here's flame zone, BAL 40, BAL 29, BAL 19 and BAL 12.5. And you always take the highest bushfire attack level that's affecting the structure. So in this case, this one is a Bell 19 house. This other example over here, again, you've got the forest vegetation, the slopes have been calculated. You've got Bell Flame Zone, Bell 40, Bell 29. So this structure here is going into Bell 29. And so you can get an understanding of where you sit in the landscape, what the different bell levels are and how that might influence things. So the issue then becomes, what can you do about that if you can do anything? Hang on, I'll just get, there we go. So effectively, the way you can do something about the bell is you either manage the vegetation, as Catherine said, within the site itself, so you're increasing the separation distance. But where you've got an adjoining landholder, it might be private property or national park or Department of Lands, Crown, something like that, you can't do anything about it. So if you move the building closer to the hazard, you go into the flame zone. If you're moving the building further away from the hazard, then you're reducing the bushfire attack levels. So there's a little bit of latitude there, and where you've got small blocks, it's quite difficult to do anything about it. But you might be able to approach the neighbour and say, look, can we manage land out here? In which case you'd need an easement or some form of approval for ongoing management of that land. But so there's a couple of mechanisms. If you've got bigger parcels of land, it's a little bit easier to look at managing vegetation and resiting buildings and things like that. But then you start coming into biodiversity credits and issues with vegetation retention and removal. At a broader level, you know, what does this look like? So following the 2019-2020 fires, we did a lot of work for the Rural Fire Service and Resilience New South Wales, trying to work within that streamlined process that's been mentioned already. So this is Lake Conjola, and the yellow dots are houses that were damaged or destroyed in the fires. So then at a precinct level, you can actually say, right, where's the boundary between managed and unmanaged vegetation? And then where do these houses sit within the landscape that allows people to then say, right, well, what if I move my house further away or closer in? So you start being able to provide a little bit of control, if you will, around what level of risk the future house may well be at, and what you can reasonably do to reduce your bushfire attack levels and your construction costs and things like that. So you can start moving around these things. And this is where the bell capping very much came into it, that's been mentioned earlier as well. The final thing is cost. There's not a, we get asked this a lot, you know, what's the various costs of the different bushfire attack levels? There was quite a good article in Fire Australia magazine recently that looks at, it's a West Australian based research for the different construction levels, what is the over and above cost of the various bushfire attack levels for a standard residential house. So for Bell 12.5, it's about 3.8%, and then you're going up to Bell 40, you know, sort of that 10% mark, and Bell Flame Zone is 20% over what you would normally expect. But you would need to go back to your architect or designer or builder and say, right, what does this actually look like? What are the costs of these things, and what does that look like? And certainly becomes a very important consideration. And that is me. Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Lew. We have Lisa from the New South Wales RFS online. Lisa, can I hand over to you for your presentation, please?
Yep. Hi everyone, my name is Lisa Chiu and I work in the Development Planning and Policy Unit of the New South Wales Rural Fire Service. Development planning and policy oversee all policy related work concerning bushfire protection associated with building development and land use planning across New South Wales for the Rural Fire Service. We also oversee bushfire prone land mapping for all of New South Wales. Our goal is to provide policy and related support to the public and all relevant stakeholders such as councils and bushfire consultants to enable and facilitate streamlined consents, approvals and compliance. You might have heard someone mention you need a BAL or a bushfire report if you want to do a renovation or construction, but how do you know whether you need one and what does it mean? Bushfire is part of the New South Wales landscape, as you've been hearing. Both state and local government recognise this, and the New South Wales Rural Fire Service works closely with councils to map areas of vegetation hazard across the state, including forests and grasslands. This is known as bushfire prone land. Red identifies forests, light orange, which some people may see as a dark yellow, identifies rainforest or remnant vegetation. Orange identifies grasslands, and pale yellow identifies a buffer around the bushfire prone land where homes may be affected by bushfire. Bushfire prone land identify areas where bushfire has the potential to impact the rural and urban environment. It's used as a trigger that requires homeowners and communities to consider bushfire protection when undertaking development in or near the hazard. Just because an area isn't mapped, it doesn't necessarily mean it isn't bushfire prone. And it can occasionally, a consent authority, such as a council, might still ask you for a report considering bushfire, even if your home isn't mapped as bushfire prone. If your home is on bushfire prone land, you need to get a BAL rating and may require a bushfire report to supplement your development submission. So what is a BAL? BAL stands for bushfire attack level. It is the rating of bushfire resistance for your home and is calculated by considering the vegetation hazard, the slope under the vegetation, the distance from the hazard to your home, and the fire weather characteristics for the area you live in. BAL ratings are site-specific to a property, which can mean homes near one another may not necessarily have the same rating. BALs range from BAL low to BAL flame zone, also known as BAL FZ. Lower BALs are concerned with ember protection, and higher BALs risk more exposure to radiant heat as well as embers, with BAL flame zone exposure being the most vulnerable to attack from a bushfire. The higher the BAL, the more your home may be exposed to attack from a bushfire. So how will it affect your home? If your home is on bushfire prone land, you're required to get a BAL rating if you're doing development. And this includes adding extensions, upgrading external parts of your home, building a new home, whether from scratch or knocking down and rebuilding. Your BAL rating may require you to include bushfire protection measures in the design of your development. Bushfire protection measures include asset protection zones, and these are a buffer zone between vegetation and buildings, managed to minimise vegetation fuel loads and reduce the potential of heat and flames. Access, this might be driveways and roads. It enables residents to evacuate, and it also allows emergency personnel to undertake firefighting operations. Construction, siting and design. The design of your house, the materials you build with, and the location you build on your property enhance the survivability of the building. Landscaping. Consider the trees, the vegetation and landscaping elements such as, for example, wood chips in your garden to ensure you aren't adding fuel to a potential fire if it gets close to your home. And also we need to keep up ongoing maintenance to ensure gardens don't become an additional hazard that could compromise the safety of the home. Services, for example, your water supply. Water is essential to firefighting. Utilities like gas and electricity also need to be considered and located away from the hazards so that they won't contribute to the risk of fire. Emergency and evacuation planning. Whilst these aren't currently compulsory for residential homes, anyone living in bushfire-prone areas should prepare a bushfire survival plan. The higher the BAL rating your home is built to, the less likely ignition from a bushfire will occur. However, it is really important to understand that even building to BAL flame zone is not a guarantee your home will be safe during bushfires. It's critical that you develop a bushfire survival plan to prepare you, your family, and your home in the event of a bushfire. You should plan to get out as early as possible in accordance with your bushfire survival plan. Guidance on developing your bushfire survival plan can be found on the New South Wales Rural Fire Service website, or you can contact your local Rural Fire Service brigade to assist you. Another way to understand the risk of bushfire to your home is to use the Bushfire Household Assessment Tool, which is also found on the New South Wales Rural Fire Service website. Our website has a lot of information that can help you understand and prepare yourself, your family, and your home for bushfire. If you wish to inform yourself about building developments in bushfire-prone areas, our website has information on that too. You can find out if your block of land is on bushfire-prone land using the Bushfire-Prone Land tool on the New South Wales Rural Fire Service website. But alternatively, the Department of Planning have an online spatial viewer where you can type in your address, turn on the bushfire-prone land data, and see how it falls across your property. New South Wales Rural Fire Service and our team, the team I'm part of, produce planning for bushfire protection. It's a guide on the appropriate bushfire protection measures for building development, which you would have seen Lew just show pieces of. And our website has a variety of policy notes and fact sheets on particular building development issues. If you want to get an approximate idea of the BAL on your property, you can also use the single dwelling application kit, which is also on our website. But I do need to say, councils may not accept this kit, and it's really best used as a guide only, or for very minor development, such as a small shed on a very low risk site. One thing that is important to note is that the New South Wales Rural Fire Service, we don't prepare BAL ratings. The tools on our website can guide you and help you get a general idea. However, we strongly suggest you talk to an accredited bushfire consultant to get the right information for your site. You can find a list of accredited bushfire consultants on the FPA website. And I just want to say thank you, and please stay bushfire ready.
Thank you both, Lisa and Lew, for those presentations. If anyone has any questions for Lisa or Lew, please have a think, pop it in the chat. What we might do is we are running a little bit ahead of schedule today. So Nat and I are going to go through both councils' rebuilding after bushfire documents. They're both very similar. However, we'll go through them with you now, just for a bit of info.
Okay, thank you, Corinne. So after the fires, Wingecarribee Shire Council developed a really great document about rebuilding after bushfire, which talks about some of the policy and bushfire attack level New South Wales RFS and state government restrictions that are in place, and also the supports available within each council. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen just to show you these documents. So we'll be uploading both of these documents onto the onto our Expo sections of both websites after this as well. Our one is quite new. Wingecarribee's has been finalised for some time. Ours is quite a new document. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen with you, sorry. So these documents here are available, but then there's also the other support. So as Stephen and Jake mentioned before, that there have been fees waived for different aspects of the planning process. So one of the things that people can do is to come in for a free pre-DA meeting. They can always come in and chat with the duty planner at council as well to get some more information about that building process and getting started after fire. I'm just going to run through these documents. So the first one here is a mulch fact sheet that we put together with our environment team here at council with some information, because it's obviously something that people have a lot of questions about after a disaster when trees are down and people are getting a lot of trees chipped on their property. We've seen it again recently with our storm in Belmere as well. So we have this, this mulch and its benefits after a bushfire fact sheet available that we'll be uploading to our website. Okay, and
You're
then
doing well, Nat. Multitasking, which is cool.
You can see I'm still learning my way around Zoom, but we have, so this is Wingecarribee's Building After Bushfire document. So this was developed in 2020 following the fires and is already available on Wingecarribee Shire Council's website. We will be putting it on the Expo section as well, but this can be just a really great document to have on hand. So it talks about not only the rebuilding process, but things around common questions that come up around shipping containers and storage and temporary accommodation as well. So obviously with the not-for-profit groups like Minderoo and Habitat for Humanity doing temporary housing options, this can be a really great document to refer to when you're going through that process and looking to make decisions or putting storage containers on property to store things while you go through that rebuilding process. And then we also have the Wollondilly Shire Council version of that document as well, which, as I mentioned, is quite new. So it's not sitting on our website yet, but we will be putting it up today after this expo. So this has been based on the Wingecarribee document. We've also added in the local context around Wollondilly as well. So both of these fact sheets can be a really helpful resource for people when you're first going through a disaster event. So some of this information will also apply to flood and storm rebuilds as well, in terms of the temporary accommodation options and around those processes and some of the support available to disaster impacted residents. So these are a really great resource that we'll have up on our website very soon.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that with us, Nat. What we might do is we might break for 10 minutes. You might be all dying for a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. But what I do challenge you, there are over 30 of you online today. So maybe as you're grabbing a cup of tea, have a think about just process that information that you've just experienced there. Have one question ready for us in the chat on the way back, and we'll introduce our panelists up and we'll have a conversation around that.
Definitely. And feel free to ask questions related to flood or storm as well. So we've obviously just had a significant storm event in Belmere. So I know some of these questions are also going to apply to people in Belmere as well. So, and I can see we've got a couple of Belmere locals online. So feel free to pop any questions in the chat for any of our panelists here today. Thank you, everyone. We'll just, we will see you back at 10:40.
Yeah, sounds good.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Hi everyone, welcome back from the break, and thank you all for staying online with us. Just wanted to start while we let everyone return back from the break by sharing a video from the NRRA. So as Kim mentioned at the beginning, today's Expo is a partnership between Wollondilly and Wingecarribee Shire Councils, Resilience New South Wales and the National Recovery and Resilience Agency. So Resilience New South Wales and the NRRA are relatively new agencies that have both come into place after the 2019-20 bushfires. And tomorrow we'll have a presentation from the Executive Director from Resilience New South Wales. But we're just going to share a video about the National Recovery and Resilience Agency, just to give everybody a chance to return from the break. We're getting some really great questions in the chat, but just going to share this video quickly before we start our panel discussion.
Whether a community has been through a flood, bushfire, cyclone, years of drought or some other disaster like the pandemic, recovery for some will take time. So a national agency that will stick around for this recovery will draw on lessons from previous disasters, will ask the important question, what do you think is needed? And will champion steps to lessen the impact of future disasters is something that I have long strongly advocated. On 5 May of this year, Prime Minister Scott Morrison announced the establishment of the National Recovery and Resilience Agency, and that was in response to a key recommendation of the Royal Commission into National Natural Disaster Arrangements. This historic move means there is a single enduring national agency that will drive Australia's capability to be better prepared for natural disasters and drought and recover from all hazards. From our origins after the 2019 North Queensland monsoonal trough, the principle of locally led, locally understood, locally implemented has guided all of our work. We have staff in every Australian state and territory, and this includes our Recovery Support Officers, or RSOs as we call them, who operate from their agency vehicles. They work closely with their local councils and other community leaders, government agencies and industry bodies. Prime Minister Morrison calls them our boots on the ground and hearts at the table. And they make sure people get the information they need and direct them to the right help and support for their particular situation. The national network is a critical part of our operation. You can't create government policy and services without knowing how they'll play out on the ground and without understanding the people that they're designed to serve, the survivors. My experience in North Queensland gave me a deep understanding of the long-term impacts of natural disasters on regional communities. Shortly after my appointment, I was quickly on the ground in some of the worst affected areas, and I came to understand just how devastating, widespread and shocking the event was. We worked closely with mayors, council staff, community members, graziers, farmers and small business owners to understand their recovery needs, and then to make sure that the government support hit the mark. Now, as my role takes me to areas impacted by the bushfires, floods and cyclones elsewhere, often overlaid by years of drought, mice plagues and grasshopper infestations and COVID restrictions, I continue to be impressed by the way people affected by these significant challenges get on with the job of putting their lives and communities back in order. We Australians are a stoic mob. Communities are best supported by everyone working together. The National Recovery and Resilience Agency works hand in glove with states, territories and local governments who also play a vital disaster response and recovery role and who are a key agent in helping communities to minimise the impact of these natural disasters. We all have a role to play in the immediate response, recovery and preparedness phases, and our collective efforts will lead to much better outcomes for Australians individually and the nation as a whole. In late 2017, Deloitte Access Economics estimated that for the preceding decade, natural disasters have cost Australia over $18 billion per year on average, taking into account both tangible and intangible costs. While much effort is and must be focused on the immediate cleanup and reinstatement of essential public services and infrastructure, we need to do this with an eye on the future and not just build back, but rather build back stronger. We need to do this to try and break the cycle of building, repairing and replacing, only to have to come and do it again when the next storm, cyclone or flood strikes. As a nation, we are good at mopping up, cleaning up, standing up. We are, after all, the land of drought and flooding rains, tragically, but it is simply not sustainable for the taxpayers and ratepayers to keep picking up the tab. The National Recovery and Resilience Agency will drive efforts to minimise risk and the impact of major events. It's imperative we do this. The Productivity Commission findings cited by the Insurance Council of Australia reveal that 97% of all disaster funding is spent on the cleanup. 97%, and just 3% on mitigation and being better prepared. Now we need to flip that. We need to address the imbalance. The science tells us that longer, hotter, drier summers and more extreme weather are here to stay. We can never flood, cyclone, drought or fireproof the country, but we can do better preparedness. I know that resilience means different things to different people, depending on where they live. People who have had everything thrown at them across generations don't need a lecture on being more resilient. They don't need more slogans. What they deserve is the support and encouragement to be better prepared, and every level of government has a role to play, together in partnership with the local communities that they serve. Preparedness must be the prism through which local communities plan and execute real fair income strategies that work for them and their particular circumstances. Through the National Recovery and Resilience Agency and other initiatives, the Australian Government is throwing substantial support behind local communities. These are your communities, to help prepare for disasters and to minimise their impacts. However, there are many players in the recovery space, and the Australian Government is but one. State agencies and local government have a key role to play. Mitigation and risk reduction cannot be the work of government alone. The public also must step up. We all share this responsibility. It's estimated that many of us are simply not prepared. We have a generational opportunity to address many of the challenges we face. The responsibility to balance public safety and our expectations of the Australian way of life with what is responsible and possible development is long past due. Now, this is going to be a difficult and at times painful national discussion. Living life among the gum trees, developing on floodplains and cliff tops in coastal areas and building homes and workplaces that are not fit for the risk must be challenged. They have to be challenged. This is not an exclusive list. The challenge is how we collectively prepare ourselves for the next disaster while assuring that we support those recovering from the last, because there will always be another major event that challenges us as a country.
Thanks for sharing that, Nat. I just wanted to thank so far everybody that's contributed this morning. And what we would like to do is now invite all of our guest speakers back to the platform so that we can answer some of the questions that have already been put into the chat and into the Q&A section. to make it a bit easier, I will get Nat and Corinne to go through those questions from their end. And then if the relevant agency or person could please answer those questions, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, so our first one is for the RFS. So wondering if RFS or consultancies have any data related to house losses from the 1920 build to BFP specification compared to those that were not.
BFP is bushfire protection measures. So we do have the house loss data. We currently have research actually being undertaken to try and specifically look at that. Obviously, it's quite a complex data set to deal with because across the state we have a number of councils that we're trying to get information from, and it varies from digital to microfiche. So there is definitely research being undertaken, but there are currently no results available. We also have a couple of other projects that we'd really love to get going to try and provide even more information, but they're currently still in the design phase. And I guess the other thing to say is that the bushfire inquiry for the 1920 fires did state that it considers fewer homes were lost because of the introduction of planning for bushfire protection and the bushfire protection measures that several of the homes in these fire affected areas actually did have on their structures.
That's great. Thank you, Lisa. That's really interesting to know and very, very reassuring as well. Our next question is, why is it when a private certifier is used that neighbours are not notified of plans on adjoining properties which may impact their property and privacy? Either Stephen or Jake, are you able to provide any information for that question?
Okay, I can try and answer that one for you. So when a private certifier is used, there are certain instances where they need to notify neighbours. That's in the environmental planning and assessment regulation. But in some instances they don't need to notify neighbours, especially in rural contexts as well. So that more or less would be the reason why you wouldn't be getting notified in like a rural context yet.
Okay. Thank you.
To add to that, Stephen.
That's it. Part to say that once you go over BAL 29, can no longer be assessed as compliant development application, has to be submitted to the council as a development application. And then, of course, what falls into play is council's notification policy and whether or not council normally notifies neighbours of submitted applications.
Yes, Jodie?
Adding on to that, usually when a private certifier is used for other than going into council for development application, compliant development has a lot more stricter rules than development application. So usually a private certifier cannot hand over a construction certificate unless all the rules are complied to, and that includes privacy to neighbours. So usually you are in a way safeguarded on that, therefore they could bypass notification.
Thanks, Jodie. Ross or Nancy, did you have anything that you'd like to add? Okay, no problem. We'll move on to the next question.
Okay, so what is someone who's still at the beginning of their rebuild journey? Where should they start and who do they talk to?
I might just jump into that one for a start and just say that this is really common, that even after the Greenwater Creek fire, we're still seeing residents who are at the beginning of their rebuild journey. And I think it's a really difficult one for residents because quite often there's so many external opinions and comments that are made from people about where they expect people to be at 2 years or even 1 year after the fires. So I think this is a really tricky one, very complex one.
Yeah, it's really important to note that most people that are in these in situations where they are forced to rebuild never really expected themselves to be in this situation ever in their lifetime. They went and bought a already built house for that sole purpose. That's just wasn't in their radar. So it will take a number of years almost to understand the whole process, what you might want in a home, whether you want to rebuild to the same specs. It's a really emotional, long, drawn out journey. And it's really, really hard, especially when external factors like, oh, you haven't started building yet. You know, for me, building my own home, I haven't been bushfire impacted, but it took me many years to understand the whole process and to have a look at what my options were. So yeah, that's really, it's a very, very good question, and one that we do all understand. Where should they start? I think we've given some really good resources this morning. So the Architects Assist, find an architect or someone in that area of expertise to have a chat with. You could probably add a little bit more to that, Jodie. So you're there in that consultations period. So
yeah, a very good place to start is to speak to an architect. We understand the entire process of everything. And at the same time, we could also work with your budgets. So if your land was rezoned from, say, BAL 29 to BAL 40, what are the implications of the cost and what's the implication of the size? And sometimes where your house was originally located may not be able to be there again. It may have to move on the site. I've spoken to a few people where their house had to be moved even though they're on the same site. So sometimes navigating through all the different resources and also the steps going through council is quite complicated. And an architect is well, you know, we do this every single day. So we're kind of well in tune with all the different steps on how to start rebuilding.
From a council point of view, Jake, where do you suggest?
Yeah, I think that's a good place to start. Architect, planning consultant, even bushfire consultant at the start, so you can know where you're going from the start as to what your BAL rating would be, where the best place to build is, that sort of thing. And also council officers, if you wanted to speak to us, we're happy to help and put you in the right directions.
And so because that process can be so overwhelming as well, we're very fortunate to have in place the Recovery Support Service, which was put in place by Resilience New South Wales after the bushfires. So previously had operated in the Blue Mountains after fire events up there, and then in 2019-20 across the state. And then also positions like myself and Kareem, community recovery officers within council. So because the process can be so overwhelming and so complex, because there's so much emotional attachment too for the residents who have lost their homes, the Recovery Support Service can really help with that process by just making some of those additional phone calls and helping navigate that path. Our Recovery Support Service has worked with, I think, over 280 people across Wollondilly and Wingecarribee. I hope that's the right stat, Tanya. But they've seen a lot of this stuff before as well. So they understand the role of bushfire consultants, they understand the roles of council planners and architects. They've got contacts like Architect Assist, and they can help navigate that process as well. So from that, I guess that well-being and that personal point of view, before we even look at the process point of view, which is where all of these fantastic professionals come into play, there is support to navigate those professional services as well.
Yeah, if you are interested in learning more about the RSS on Sunday, please log in. They are coming on and doing a presentation on Sunday. Some of the 3 wonderful women that we've both worked with have been outstanding in this space. They're just really, really well. And we all work really well together. So reach out.
I call them bushfire recovery, or now disaster recovery personal assistants, because they just help navigate that path.
Yeah.
Lisa, you've got your hand up as well from RFS.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that if people did lose their homes during the 1920 bushfires and are trying to rebuild, we still have the BAL capping program in place. So what that is whilst RFS don't do BAL ratings, we've actually, along with Lew's company, Black Ash, if we have a special email, and people can actually email rebuild@rfs.newsouthwales.gov.au, and we can organise to get free of charge a BAL map, but it's only for people who did lose their houses and are rebuilding basically similar or like for like back on their site. It's not if you're, you know, going to subdivide the block or anything like that. It's basically, you know, like for like. So you lost your home during the fire and you need to rebuild it back. And we'll, you know, we work very hard to try and ensure that people are able to get that BAL map so that they can proceed through to make it hopefully a little easier on them.
Definitely, and those Black Ash certificates have been fantastic. We've referred quite a few residents across for those BAL certificates, and they've been great. They come back really quickly, and with that information, it can help people get started. So it's definitely a service we've taken advantage of, I think, in both shires since the 1920 bushfires. We did have a question also in the chat that relates to that, Lisa, as well, which is around subsequent disasters. So in Wollondilly, we've had some subsequent natural disaster events, including severe storms and floods. If we had any residents that were rebuilding after those disaster events, are they able to access the Black Ash program?
The program was only set up for the bushfires, and it's specifically through Rural Fire Service. I am unaware as to whether there are, you know, any equivalent type of programs through SES or the Department of Planning to assist with flood impacted structures. Sorry.
No, that's okay, no problem. Thank you, Lisa. Our next question is, why is the process for rebuild so long? Are the GAs getting through?
I can probably question on that one, or answer that one, sorry. So from Council Wollondilly's point of view, Natalie would know the exact number or close to, but we've had 5 or 6 rebuild applications.
Yeah.
And they've all been approved relatively quickly. We prioritise those, but it does take a long time. There's a lot of different people that need to be consulted. RFS, sometimes when there's tree clearing involved, there's environmental constraints we have to consider as well. Neighbour notification. So there is things that do make it take a fair amount of time, but yeah, we do try and prioritise as best as we can. So.
I actually think this is a bit of a misconception that's out there with community as well. So we had, if we look at the number of rebuilds that we've had only, I think, around 50% of our total homes lost who have submitted DAs to rebuild. And there's a whole lot of reasons behind that. And it's such a case-by-case basis, and everyone's circumstances are so different. And I think there was one DA that we had that did take some time to get through, but that was because it was our first DA that was using BAL capping. And I actually think it went through, considering that that was our first BAL capping application, went through really well. But most importantly, it went through correctly and thoroughly, and it's so important to get that right. So, and I think that the planners from both councils who worked alongside RFS, so Lisa and David's team at RFS were fantastic through that process. So it's always good that we can get through DAs quickly, but with something like that, it's more important that we get it right. And I think it was great that RFS and council worked together through that BAL capping process to get that right, so that the residents rebuilding have that protection, because obviously they've been through such a traumatic event. We don't want to add any trauma to that process by taking shortcuts. So, and I think that was a really great outcome in the end.
Yeah. So I guess, the process for rebuild so long, for those that aren't actually rebuilding and asking that question, so go back to what we were saying before, there is this huge emotional and traumatic journey behind to getting to that point of actually submitting a DA. For just a bit of stats, Wingecarribee lost 68 homes, and only 12 have submitted DAs, and only 3 have been rebuilt. And so we're talking 2 years on now. So we're only just seeing that process even just starting to happen now. There's a few more in the pipeline about to come through. But like I said, and Nat said before, reach out to the Recovery Support Service. They'll help you through that journey. Nat and I too as well. If you need to speak to anyone in council, we're a good point of contact to start with, because we point you in the right direction as well and get these guys on board. So hopefully that's answered your question. Anything to add?
That's good. Any
All right.
other questions?
Oh, I'll add something.
Okay, Jodie.
I'm also part of an organisation called Architects Without Frontiers, and worked on areas where, more internationally, where areas were affected by tornadoes and earthquakes. Rebuilding a community is not a very fast process. So rebuilding a community takes up to 10 years before you see a community starts thriving again after a disaster has hit them. So sometimes when you look around and you see that like your neighbors are not rebuilding or your community center has been burned down, and you're thinking, why hasn't things started rebuilding? It's not, it does take a lot longer. Like the councillor said, there is a trauma associated with it. And some people sometimes think, would they want to rebuild in that community? And that thought process and that recovery process is it takes time. And seeing other communities that's been hit by natural disasters, the average time is 10 years.
Yeah, and just along those lines too, so 30% of our total loss residents have repurchased other homes as well. So they haven't maybe necessarily made the decision that they're not going to go back. They still have their land, but we have some people who have bought other homes just while they go through that process, because it is a huge thing. It's a traumatic experience to go through. Some of our residents were there during the fire on their block or in their town during the fire. So there's a huge emotional process that goes along with making those decisions, even about whether or not you will rebuild as well.
And totally come along on Sunday, because Anne Ledbeater's talking about that disaster recovery, getting over a disaster and what that looks like, navigating that medium to long-term recovery process. So that she's got a powerful speaker and got some really good insight there. So, yeah.
Catherine, did you? Oh, sorry, Catherine, you're just on mute.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I was speaking recently to someone who had been involved in the Blue Mountains recovery program after the Springwood Winmalee fires in 2013. And I had this conversation last year, and I was told that about 30% of residents had chosen not to rebuild. So that quite a few years had passed since that fire, and the recovery process is certainly very slow. I think as well, as residents are asking how can they start this process of recovery from a bushfire consultant perspective, I really encourage people to find out the appropriate bushfire attack level towards the beginning of the process, because you can save a lot of time and effort and money by avoiding redesigning something later when you find out what the BAL is. So we get a lot of clients coming to us who have completed all their plans, including engineering and structural plans. And, you know, we can suggest how they might improve their prospects of resisting a bushfire, which essentially sends them back to the beginning of their design process. And I really dislike it when that happens, because I know it's costly for them. So find out what your BAL is early on.
Absolutely. I was even chatting with a neighbour the other week who's not rebuilding after fire, but was looking to move to a bushfire prone area, and thankfully had engaged a bushfire consultant before he purchased the block, which he just said he was so glad that he did, because he actually made the decision not to purchase that block in the end, because once he went through that process and saw that the property was BAL flame zone, he decided that the cost of building on that block was going to be beyond his means. So yeah, it's not just rebuilding that we need to make these considerations, but also just when buying land or moving to a bushfire prone area. This one.
Yeah, how long does
Sorry, I just saw another question that I would like to answer, because somebody asked, I saw earlier, why two neighbours might have a different BAL and when their circumstances seem to be the same. And I'd just like to try and explain that a little bit. Sometimes residents might think that their circumstances appear to be exactly the same, but actually their building might be closer to the hazard. Or when we look at the slope that impacts the building on each side, the gradient of the slope might be steeper for one compared to the other. So often there's things that you might not readily appreciate in determining the BAL that can actually make next door neighbours have a different BAL. Sorry if I butted in then.
Okay, thanks for that. How long should a DA take from lodgement to approval? How long from DA approval to construction certificate?
Okay, so I think I touched on it a little bit before, but it's very hard to put a number or day number or month number on it. Some can be 4 weeks, some can be 20 weeks. It just really depends on each property. They're all different. They all have different considerations, but you can be assured that council will try and prioritise it as best we can.
Can a pre-DA meeting help with that process? So coming in with your builder or your architect and having a pre-DA meeting?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good idea. That way you can sort of nut out the issues that might arise during the assessment period up front. And yeah, it helps when you have a complete application up front as well. That way you don't have to ask for additional information during the assessment process as well. And one benefit to using council, we can often issue the DA and the construction certificate concurrently together. So that can save time as well, rather than consulting with the private certifier later on. So something to consider as well.
Yeah, and just touching on that additional information that you just said then, I think sometimes there's this preconceived idea that you lodge your DA to council and it goes through the DA process and you're at certification and there may be a question regarding the certification of that part, and that council will go, oh, that's incorrect, and then refuse the DA. Just to reiterate, council's actually here to work with you. So any of those questions that will come up, they will contact you and talk you through those additional information. It might be just simply providing something extra from the architect or anything like that. So yeah, we are here to work with you and through with this process. So anything to add?
That's good.
Good.
That covers about everything.
All right, beautiful.
And so there can be some other complicating factors in Wollondilly, probably and Wingecarribee as well, with mining subsidence. So it's sometimes external agencies that need to also approve development applications as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
Science or environment constraints, flooding, all sorts of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Next question is: do council RFS?
Can I jump in for a sec before you do that?
Yeah, definitely.
I just wanted to also mention that if it's a really complex bushfire scenario, New South Wales Rural Fire Service, our assessment teams, they can also meet and do a pre-DA service with the bushfire consultant and the client as well. So there is that as well, if you want to just have a double check with Rural Fire Service before you go through the process. For very difficult bushfire related stuff, that is.
That's really great to know, Lisa. I think we do have a couple of those who are yet to lodge DA, so we'll keep that in mind down the track, definitely. Our next question is: do council, RFS or consultants believe the bushfire inquiry from 2019-20 will impact or change current BAL specifications or create or offer implications or improvements for property bushfire certifications?
I'll jump in and start if you like. Yes, it will. And I can tell you right now that several of the recommendations, there is currently work going on within the Department of Planning, Rural Fire Service, and a few other agencies to actually try and come up with better policy and processes in order to, from a strategic level all the way down to your individual property site level, to try and take what we've learned from the previous fires and ensure that we're building back better to protect our communities.
I think if I can jump in there and follow on from Lisa, it's a very slow process. It's not a New South Wales centric response. So when we're talking about bushfire attack levels, it's within a national framework. So the Building Code of Australia, the National Construction Code, the Australian Standard for construction of bushfire construction of houses in bushfire prone areas is where it all comes from. And the process to change that is quite slow. So to actually change the building code is at least 18 months. There's got to be quite involved process from the various states and territories to actually put forward proposals for change. So it's not like a very quick thing. So when we're talking about BALs, so the Rural Fire Service, Department of Planning, councils can do things around local environment plans and development control plans and sort of things that are within their control. But the BALs is a difficult thing, so there'd probably be consideration of climate change, you know, what drives some of those things, what, you know, is the current fire danger ratings the right level? So you probably won't see change in that space very quickly. But as Lisa says, that there's a lot of work that is going on behind the scenes that drives that at a national level, so you're getting national consistency.
That's great. Thank you, Lew and Lisa.
Carrying on. Yes. Okay. We were asked to clear all trees up to 54 metres in order to rebuild. Why are the existing non-burnt homes allowed to keep their trees, which are close to the homes that were not destroyed? It's a very specific question. It might be difficult to answer without seeing the mapping.
I can have a crack at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crack. Love it.
Have a go. So 54 is a very specific number, and I just had a look in planning for bushfire protection. So that is potentially forest vegetation on 0 to 5 degree slope, which gives you BAL 12.5. So that becomes the piece about someone being required to clear. I don't think there's any provisions that council or the Rural Fire Service or others would say, you must do these things, you must clear the trees. Where someone is looking at situating the house, the bushfire attack level, so if it's BAL 12.5, then you've got to provide 54 metres worth of asset protection zone. So there's a standard around that, and that standard would say that you need to manage the canopy trees and the mid-story and the ground story vegetation in a certain way. The other thing to bear in mind is, and I think I said this at the start of my presentation, this is for all new development. So the trigger is you're submitting a DA or you're making some sort of formal change. So there's a slow burn here in terms of changing the resilience of the interface over a very long time. People can use the guidelines to say, I'm in BAL flame zone and I want to put an asset protection zone in and create additional clearing or, you know, manage the fire. But there's a couple of different processes. So existing legacy houses, that there's no requirement until they actually formally start the process. When you start the process, the new standards all come into play. So you're getting that increasing resilience, you know, over a much longer time frame. So hopefully that makes a bit of sense to people.
That was really good. Thank you. I learned something there. That was great. So that's pretty much it for the questions that we have up so far. Oh, do we have one more? Bear with us while we have a quick look. Here we go. Sorry, one last one. Given that most of us may purchase existing properties rather than new builds, what affordable and accessible tools and services are available to inform potential buyers of the risks and vulnerabilities associated with a particular property? I should have worn my glasses today.
Happy to jump in again.
Yeah, go for it.
And anyone else? Lisa mentioned the household assessment kit that the Rural Fire Service has. So that's something that people can use themselves to get a bit of an idea of it. If people get that wrong, if you call it woodland instead of forest or whatever it is, you'll throw the calculations in terms of what the BAL levels are out massively. So I think that's where, you know, Lisa had said quite correctly, and Catherine, was that, you know, where you're using someone that actually understands how to determine the BAL levels, it is probably the way to go. I think quite a lot of bushfire consultants out there would provide due diligence reports, so give you an indication of what the bushfire attack level is to inform people. So we do a lot of that. So people are making sort of that informed decision around what the bushfire attack level is going into it. The Rural Fire Service also have, and you might want to correct me here, Lisa, the household assessment tool. So there's an online tool that the RFS have that people can step through what their own circumstances are that sort of tell them what the risk is. And you can tweak the tool and change different aspects of it to change the level of risk. So that gives you, you know, what you can reasonably do around the house and manage the landscape and gardens and things like that. So there's a couple of options there that people can use.
That's correct. There are a lot of tools on our website. I put some links in my slides, so please feel free to use those. I would also recommend that when you are purchasing an existing property, you ensure that you get the certificate. It's a 10.7, right, Council? And that will actually tell you whether the property has bushfire prone land or flood prone land. And that's a really good way, you know, you can use that, then go on. Again, I had a link in my talk about a spatial viewer. You can actually go on and have a look at all those hazard layers in there, just to give yourself, you know, a bit of an idea. The thing is, just because your property has a classification of bushfire prone land, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be, you know, the end of the world. So it's better to actually go and have a look and see what that property has associated with it, and then for yourself, you know, weigh up the risks that you're comfortable with as well. But please make sure, you know, use all of the tools we have on the RFS website, you know, to try and assist you. And then, you know, if you do have an existing site, an existing home, and you're just not sure where to start with your bushfire protection measures, reach out to your volunteer rural fire service brigades and see if they can actually give you some help, so that, you know, to guide you in the right direction, because your local bushfire brigades, those volunteers, you know, they're local to your area. They understand what the landscape is like, what the bushfire is like, and they can really be a huge asset to talk to just appreciate what kind of things you can do around your home to make it, you know, bushfire ready. And there are some other community engagement programs from Rural Fire Service, which the volunteers may also be able to hook you up with in terms of understanding how better to just do general maintenance around your home to ensure it is, you know, better protected, whether it be doing modifications to the home itself or simply just maintenance that, you know, can drastically reduce the risk.
Thank you, Lisa. I was going to say the same thing. So I'm a community engagement officer with my local RFS brigade, and be more than happy at any time to take a call from community and come out and have a chat, as I'm sure all of our brigades across the Southern Highlands would be as well. And we also have some really great volunteers in our Wollondilly support brigade who do that work as well. So yeah, definitely contact your local resources, and we're more than happy to have those conversations. Oh, got some hands up.
There's a very useful document that the RFS has as well called Building Best Practice Upgrades. And if you have a building that was built prior to bushfire protection measures being required, it is a pretty good document on what measures you might be able to take to improve your building's Ember protection. And you can easily apply it to any house. So that's another one. It's the Building Best Practice Upgrade document.
Thank you, Catherine. That's great. Jodie?
Yeah, I'll add on to that. So a lot of people actually do consult an architect prior to buying. The 10.7 certificate actually comes with all your sales contract. So you could easily just throw that off to your architect, or, you know, in this instance, me. And they could advise you all the risk of having a house in a bushfire prone area. The good news is majority of houses in BAU 29 and lower, if they're not bushfire resilient, they could easily be retrofitted to meet the new codes. That's not really going to cost you an arm and a leg.
So Jodie, some of the things that we get questions about sometimes from people might be around shutters and windows and doors, solar panels, whether or not they can or can't have solar panels depending on their bushfire ratings. Are they the sort of questions that they could take to an architect as well?
Yes, yes. We will guide you through all the different construction codes, what you can do. And it's very similar to my presentation, when you're putting fire shutters on your external windows and the code says you're allowed to have a mesh panel, you can't just go out and get any mesh panel. There are regulations around it. And when you're buying your windows and things to retrofit, we could guide you around which codes to look for and what you have to be compliant to.
Thank you, Jodie. Okay, we have a question in the chat as well, which is around when neighbouring properties might have dangerous trees. And is there any assistance that Council RFS can provide sort of to encourage or to support with resolving the issue of dangerous trees on neighbouring properties? And then sort of along the end of the lines of that question too, if they need to move their building envelope to get away from trees on neighbouring properties, can council support throughout that process? Might be a tree and vegetation.
Yeah,
answer.
I think if it's okay, I think it might be one better to be asked to be answered after a bit more research. So I'm more than happy to help if we can get the address and that sort of thing. We'll get an answer to you about that for sure.
There's a bit site specific, and it may involve council's tree and vegetation officers there in that one. So happy to park that. If you'd like to email through a bit more information on your property and a contact number and which shire you're from, more than happy to walk you through that process. That's what we're looking for. So,
and possibly the bushfire consultant to look at the building envelope as well. Campbell,
yeah,
is that right? Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. I think we've got another question. No. Okay, great. I think we've answered all of the questions. I'm just going to, we now have,
we've got Graham McGuiggan here online. Thank you for joining us so quickly. He's the manager member service for Master Builders Association in New South Wales. Graham has managed the member services department for the past 13 years and has been instrumental in enhancing member benefits and the development of new services. In the past 5 years, he's also accepted the responsibility of overseeing the 8 regional offices throughout New South Wales. Prior to joining the Master Builders Association, he has held senior management roles with Repco, TradeLink, Plumbing Supplies, and BOC Gases. Graham's career has spanned more than 30 years in senior management roles with the building and construction industry. So over to you, Graham, if you're ready.
Yes, I am. Thank you. Wasn't sure whether or not that was about me or someone else there. Okay, so look, I'm the manager for member services for the Master Builders Association. I manage the services department, and a little bit about the Master Builders, a little bit of history, I suppose. The association is the oldest registered industrial instrument in Australia. We've been around for quite a while, 148 years. And our first meeting was held in the city of Sydney in a hotel of all places in 1873, and that was November, I believe. Next slide, thanks. Can't actually see the slides.
Graham, would you like us to share your slides?
Yes, please. That's how I thought it was going to be done.
They're just bringing those slides up for you now, Graham. Won't be a second.
Great, thank you.
Just bear with us, Graham. We're just having a few technical issues. Just give us a second.
Okay, Graham, can you see those?
Yes, that's all good. Now I've covered off that first first part there. Is it Natalie or Kim I'm dealing with? All right, so whereabouts are we located? Well, we're located throughout the state. We have 10 offices, 2 of which are in the metropolitan area. Forest Lodge basically houses all our service departments, excluding 2, which are our training and also our apprenticeship services. And they reside at Norwest in the business park out in the western suburbs of Sydney. So all the other service departments and the master builders are actually housed in Forest Lodge, and they service our members, which total a little over 8,038, with the specialist services that they require. Our other locations that you can see there, we're located in Albury, we're in Ballina to the north, Gosford, Newcastle, Orange, Port Macquarie, Ulladulla and Wollongong. And in particular with relevant to the presentation today, the Ulladulla office was highly instrumental in the bushfires that occurred down the south coast, south of Nowra, right down to the Victorian border. And I'll tell you a little bit about what services they provided locally and how the community tapped into them. If we could go to the next slide, thanks. So the sectors that we service throughout the building and construction industry, they include residential, and the residential sector includes your builders and trade contractors that produce and renovate new dwellings and also renovate them. The commercial sector, these are generally larger companies that have high dollar turnover projects, and a lot of them are federally funded, state government, and then you have the other private sector funded projects that happen in that area. Some of those contracts may include projects such as hospitals, schools, roadways, railways, etc. All those infrastructure projects the commercial sector are heavily engaged in. Specialist contractors, we also include in there the contractors that service civil projects. And civil projects are usually those projects that fall into that rail, road, etc. area. Tunnels, a lot of the tunnels around the Sydney, they're certainly produced by principal contractors commercial, but they also include the specialist trades in that civil sector. Services sector, pretty self-explanatory there from the notes. These are all the other service departments, and that's exactly what they are. They produce something for the builders or the people engaged in the building industry that provide the plans, designs, building consultants that provide either professional or expert witness for clients. Suppliers and manufacturers, that's everyone from your local Mitre 10s through to Bunnings and anyone that's producing products locally in Australia and sourced from overseas that actually want to be members of the association. Other, this is a smaller sector, and you'll see in the following slide some numbers around that. But generally, these are people that want to stay connected with the industry, or they're apprentices and students that look towards us for professional support and information. Next one, please. Next slide. So our members, what do they look like? Well, by the sector, you can see there from 5,010 in our residential sector. Now, these are 5,000 individuals. They're not actually numbers of people in the businesses. These are just one business, one member, one record. So there, as you can see there, that is very high as far as our member base. In the residential sector itself, approximately 80% of these are small business. The other 20% is made up of your medium to larger project home builders, but the 3,000 of those small mum and dad builders that I would refer to them as, that you would see in your local areas with their utes running around the neighbourhood. The commercial sector, 285 members. That might surprise some people, but commercial by itself, by definition, is high dollar volume project work. And there certainly aren't as many projects in the commercial sector as to what there are starts in the residential. Residential builds over the last 12 months total around about $38,000 to $40,000. Sorry, 38 to 40,000 projects per annum. So as you can see, the residential requires a lot more people in that area to perform that work. Commercial, they are very large builders. Tier ones, there are only about 10 to 12 of these federally, and they're accredited to be able to perform and tender work for the federal government. The next category down, we classify them as tier 2 builders. They can tender for and are listed for state government work. And then your tier 3s generally cover off private projects and local government projects. 1,548 specialist contractors. These are individual trades that service the industry. And a lot of those mainly fall within that civil sector. So they could be anything from bridge builders to post-tensioning for bridge. They could be rail specialists, all a particular area that services the industry. 1,548, you'll find a lot of these also on commercial projects. 388 members in the services sector. These are people that want to connect with our member base and provide services to them, such as architects, designers, building consultants. We have 156 suppliers and manufacturers and 651, pardon me, that fall into the other category, being the apprentices, excuse me, students, honorary members, and we also have some retired members, about 30 or 40 that just want to stay connected with the industry. Next slide, please. The service departments that make up the master builders. So we have the department that I look after, which is member services. Member services is a bit of a conduit, really. We're the first port of call generally for members or the public who want to connect with a particular service or need to have someone speak to them from the specialist departments that we have. But generally, we're the first port of call for the public. And they come through to us seeking information such as, where can I get a master builder member to do some work for me? Or I have a project whereby I want to make sure that the person that we're doing with them is licensed. Sometimes we're confused with fair trading, who actually issue the licenses, but we're quite happy to help people out with that search from the public. Our work health safety department, we have 6 specialist staff in that area that spend the majority of their time on site and assisting members ensure compliance around work health and safety. And we work very closely with Safe Work New South Wales to ensure that our builders and their projects that they're doing and the people that are on their sites are actually compliant and safe. Our Workplace Relations Department. This is probably a fancy name for industrial relations, the old terminology. They look after and service our members with any questions that might relate to putting in place an enterprise bargain agreement for them. These are generally commercial, larger builders that employ a lot of staff. Award interpretation, and they also conduct contractor audits on behalf of those federal and state government commercial projects, whereby they need to ensure that the contractors working on site actually have all their paperwork in place and can perform the work. Insurance department, we have our own brokerage, which is Master Builders Insurance Brokerage. Education and skills development, this is our training resource centre out at Norwest. This can provide qualification, trade qualifications, much the same as TAFE, professional development, and any short courses that are required to run their business. Also located, as I mentioned before, on that site at Norwest is our Apprenticeship Services Department. So we actually engage 280 apprentices that we host through industry so that they can get their practical experience, but their actual qualifications are conducted on site at the education and skills development area. So that gets them their Cert 3 qualifications that can, depending upon the trade they do, can lead to them also participating as a builder in the industry. Financial services, this is a leasing facility or finance, also a car search for our members. So we're connected through the financial services area with a partnership with Macquarie Bank. Our events marketing and sponsorship, that's about all the events that we put on to either educate our members or put products and services in front of them, and our administration area, which manages all our money. Next slide, thanks. So our partners, who we work closely with, well, as I mentioned previously, we work very closely with Safe Work New South Wales. In the Services New South Wales area, pardon me, we're working now with the Resilience Department. Fair trading, where we talk to them on a regular basis, particularly when we're dealing with continuous professional development and licensing questions with fair trading. iCare, which looks after the home warranty insurance that our brokerage has a relationship with. Long Service Leave Corporation, so that the industry can actually connect and provide themselves with long service. And the Vocational and Education and Training Accreditation Board, VTAB, where we have our scope of qualifications that we register with them. Two other partners that we have a very close relationship is also Mates in Construction. Mates provide a suicide prevention and counselling service to the industry that anyone in the industry can connect with. And MEND, finally, these are a work rehabilitation service. They also will do inspections on clients' office space to see whether or not, in fact, they're set up with the correct ergonomics, and they also provide counselling as well. On the next slide. So, who turn to us in times of need? So our customers, the general public, would be particularly in these areas where we have natural disasters. Our phones usually ring quite hot at the time. Small business owners, these don't necessarily have to be associated with the industry, but will also come to us for assistance with award and rates of pay and things of that nature, predominantly. Our members, certainly our members rely on us for the services to ensure that they are compliant with legislation and that they are up to date with all the new products and installation techniques and the technical assistance that they need with interpreting the National Construction Code, or NCC or BCA, and industry standards and tolerances in the performance of their trade. Principal contractors engaged to manage projects, and I'll talk specifically later about one of those principal contractors that was involved with the bushfires. Insurance Council of Australia turned to us, particularly in these times where we have natural disasters, to look towards us to develop expression of interest within the industry with contractors who they can get hold of quickly that want to actually perform that work. And Services New South Wales, which I've mentioned before, and quite a few departments that we work with very closely. Next slide. So what can we do? Well, probably the best one that I could talk to would be what we did with Laing O'Rourke, who were the principal contractor, and they were engaged as part of the cleanup the New South Wales bushfires. So we actually provided free of charge to Laing O'Rourke our office amenities down in the Ulladulla area, and that included meeting rooms for their project and site managers, amenities for them to be able to have lunch and things of that nature, and full use of our communications through internet and phones. So Laing O'Rourke took residence in our office there from February 2020 through to October 2020. They had 4 staff permanently on site in our Ulladulla office and a host of supervisors who were in and out of the place on a regular basis. And they had 24-hour access to that office if required. So that's certainly one of the big areas that when we have these things that occur throughout the state, whether it be floods or fires, that we can actually play a very active part in that. We also assist inquiries for local trade contractors, provide the insurers, as I mentioned before, with contractor contacts, compile those expression of interest databases for them, pardon me, and keep members updated on what those local issues are, particularly with those fires down there, so that everyone was kept well and truly up to date with what was in front of them. All right, so some of our contacts, which I've listed there, which were engaged in the South Coast fires. We had Lynn Smith, who's our regional coordinator for the Southern Highlands, Shoalhaven and Snowy Mountain Shires. The contact numbers are there on the screen for you. Lee Tanks is our regional coordinator based in Illawarra. His patch comes a little bit down towards that now, and he had some crossover there as well. And my contact details, should anyone need them at all, they're also available there. And that is about me, Natalie.
Thank you, Graham.
Thanks, Graham. I'll jump in there. Thanks, Graham. Thank you very much for that. Really appreciate. There is a question in the chat for you. Let me just jump into that. Can a non-member of the public contact Master Builders Association with any inquiries?
Absolutely. We're quite often we'll field questions from that actually work in the trade, that or work in the industry that are trying to source information, we're quite happy to provide that for them. But the difference between that individual and someone who's a member, they will get as much support or guidance to assist them, but they won't be actually able to contact and speak with the actual service departments. So they generally log with me as well.
Great, excellent. So if anybody needs to, they've got the contacts there, and everything will be, all these presentations and everything will be available on Council's website, so people will be able to access that information. So, so if anybody's got any further questions for our group of panelists here today, please pop them in the question and answers and the chat, and we can send them through to get some answers for you. I'll cross over to you, Nat and Corinne.
Thanks, Kim. One thing I just wanted to mention, so I did briefly touch before on the recovery support service. So I do have Tanya and Ray online today, and Tanya, I might just get you to pop your team's details in the chat. So as I mentioned before, the recovery support service, I've kind of introduced them when I talk to residents about them being the disaster recovery personal assistants. So they've walked with us in Wollondilly through bushfire, flood and storm, and they've provided case management support and wellbeing support to individuals in both Wollondilly and Wingecarribee Shire throughout the last 2 years. Thankfully, they've just been refunded under a new block of funding through the South West Sydney Local Health District, so they'll be around for another 12 months, which is fantastic. So if anyone ever wants support with navigating this process, it can be really, really overwhelming to go through this process. And as Corinne touched on before, for a lot of people, they never planned on building a house or didn't plan on building a house under these circumstances or right now. So Tanya, Raylene, Michelle and Alison are a great support, and they can be there to walk through that process, navigate that process, share their contacts and their knowledge that they've gained. They've seen it all in the last couple of years, whether it's insurance issues, rebuild issues, wellbeing issues. Obviously, this is a very traumatic event. So they know of all the different services out there, financial counsellors, the different grants that are available, the different not-for-profit agencies that are providing support. And for many people, it will be the first time ever needing to access those supports or services. So please feel free to contact either Tanya or myself or Corinne at council at any point in time, or we could link you in with not only the recovery support, but some of those other supports that are out there as well, and help you walk through that process, as will the planning teams from both councils when it does come time to lodge those DAs and to build. I'm just very quickly going to share a slideshow about what's happening in Wollondilly since the fires. So my role with council is a community recovery officer. So I started with council August following the bushfires, so August 2020. And sorry, this is just not playing nicely for me here. Started in August 2020 following the bushfires, and have been now working through council, with council through a number of disaster events. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about what we have in place as council as recovery, some of the things we've done since the fires, and some of the things that we're doing on an ongoing basis as well. So as we mentioned before, Stephen and Jake mentioned that we have our Activate Wollondilly 2021 Long-Term Recovery and Resilience Plan. So these plans not only looking at our recovery following the Greenwattle Creek bushfire, but also the subsequent disaster events and now COVID-19 as well. So we hear it a lot, but the 2019-20 fires were unprecedented in a lot of ways. We've seen severe bushfire events in the past, but this one went for a very long time and it impacted such a huge part of the country at one time. And then we had, unfortunately, COVID-19 starting just after, and a flood event in between in our Shire. So Stephen and Jake did touch on this a little bit before as well, but the impact for Wollondilly was significant, and Wingecarribee. So right on the border of Wollondilly and Wingecarribee and Buxton, we did lose 2 RFS volunteers, which had a significant impact on all of the Shire. We lost 19 homes in Wollondilly and 18 further homes damaged, a huge number of outbuildings, so 66 outbuildings destroyed and 45 damaged. I have a feeling that number's probably much higher. A lot of people don't reach out for support, so we don't hear about a lot of things. 1,276 kilometres of fencing, and we know that people are still having issues with replacing fencing now, years down the track. So the impact was just huge across our Shire. We actually had the 4th highest burn scar in Australia throughout that period. So council obviously play a role in response as well. So councils in partnership with state and federal government are responsible for contributing to the safety and wellbeing of communities by participating in local emergency management and recovery efforts. So what a lot of people probably don't understand, I know I didn't until I came on to council, was that council plays a really active role in the local emergency management committee, and council staff are quite often in those emergency operation control centres during disaster events. So it has council play a really important role in not only recovery, but also in response and the time during a disaster event as well. So here in Wollondilly in 2016, we were impacted by a major flood event, and it was a devastating event for our community and really highlighted for the need for council to really have strong disaster recovery and preparedness frameworks in place. So they did a lot of community consultation following the floods, and a lot of deliberative engagement sessions with community that were facilitated by external disaster recovery experts. And from there, we developed our Activate Wollondilly framework. And it's that framework that's guiding our recovery from the Greenwater Creek bushfire. So I won't go into too much detail, but here's a little bit about our Activate Wollondilly framework. And that first slide is recovery commences when response commences. And so straight away, when we have a disaster event in Wollondilly, we really try and quickly set up community recovery information centres to give out that information and try and link people into those supports and the services that are operating in the area. And we've done that recently following the Thornmeer storm, where we had 2 community information sessions, and it partnered up with a number of services who also support community during disaster recovery, and a huge thank you to the services that are involved in that process. Our mayoral relief fund, which comes into play following a significant disaster event. So during the Greenwater Creek fire, I'll touch a little bit down the track, but that was a huge donations from community come in, and then council can pass that money out to impacted residents, and it really made a huge difference during the fires. We so appreciate the support that came from community during that event, and we've also been able to use funding to support our Thornmeer storm impacted residents as well. So the Community Recovery Information Centres I touched on. We also have a local recovery and resilience committee. So that committee has been in place for a very long period of time. So following the 2016 flood or storm, it doesn't always meet on an ongoing basis. So during the fires, we actually were able to reinstate that committee. Before it was in December. So after the fires that impacted Orangeville, Warrambie, Oakdale and Urandry, but prior to the fire impacting Buxton and Bargo. So we were straight away able to have that committee up and going. So we had that community representation about what the needs were in community, and a really broad cross-section of community working together to support the community through that recovery process. And we're still meeting now, 2 years on from the fire. We meet bi-monthly now, that the work isn't as urgent in nature, but we're still always focusing on those ongoing needs in community and adapting to those ongoing needs as they change, and also looking at how we can work together with communities, as how council can work together with different community organisations to plan for a stronger response in the future, and also our preparedness as well. So we have a number of preparedness tools. So we have our Get Ready Wollondilly website, and there's a lot of information on our website too around preparing for disaster. We're doing things all the time like partnering with RFS and SES. So we have 2 Get Ready workshops, one happening in November and one happening in December, that are in partnership with New South Wales RFS and SES, and also the Red Cross. So they're really exciting. And deliberative engagement, so that's something that we've committed to do following all disaster events, which is really the chance for us to engage with community, talk about what worked and what didn't work. And we've done a lot of that since the fire. So we had 2 series of community forums that were hosted by Anne Leadbeater, who's a disaster recovery expert. Anne will be speaking for us on Sunday. So she's been a part of our recovery journey from the early days. So and she facilitated those sessions, which gave us some really great feedback around what has and hasn't worked for our communities following the 2019-20 bushfires, and how we can improve our response and the things that we need to do. A lot of that information has already gone into planning for some of our grant applications and some of our future project work, and we will be continuing to use that information down the track. So a number of internal reviews happening within council about our response during the fires, and then also looking at ways for us to improve practice going forward, training that we'll deliver for staff, and our different grant projects that we have as well. So as I mentioned before, so recovery commences when response commences. So I won't go into too much of this, so I have touched on it already, but yeah, so everything from our outdoor staff who are on the ground during fires, clearing trees, clearing roads, reopening public spaces, that Recovery and Resilience Committee and our recovery information point. So as you can see, during the 2019-20 fires, they happened right before Christmas, as you all know. So we were able to be a donation point for presents and give those out to community, which is great. But that's one of the areas that we're really looking to improve on moving forward, and partnering with groups like Give It to manage our donations so we can improve that community recovery information point process and partner with the existing services in the community. So as I mentioned before, the community of Wollondilly was extremely generous following the Green Wattle Creek bushfire. We had around $454,000 of donations that came in, which is incredible, absolutely amazing. And 186 individuals or families were supported through that Mayor's Relief Fund. 100% of all donated funds were distributed. So that's really huge. And you can see some of the things that it helped out with there, whether it was cleanup, replacing white goods, clothing, bedding, all those things that people just hadn't planned for that they needed support with, tools, so that our trade, construction is obviously a huge industry for Wollondilly. A lot of our tradesmen lost tools or trailers and vehicles. So the Mayor's Relief Fund could even help with helping those small business operators get up and going. It was just amazing. And the impact of that fund was huge. So the Activate Wollondilly plan looks at 4 different elements of recovery. So economic recovery, social recovery, built recovery, and natural recovery. So it really spans all of our council teams, and councils are huge organisations, but recovery work is really cuts across all of our different departments. So obviously built recovery with our planners, our certifiers, our strategic planners, recovery with our environment teams. So we're not only looking at things like the grants that we're giving out, the grants that we're applying for are sometimes for community projects, but sometimes they're for things you don't see around managing vegetation, regenerating the environment that was impacted by the fires, and a lot of really great projects going on with our environment team. Our economic recovery, so during our planning for economic recovery, it's really about getting business back up and going. So with our grant projects, we try to encourage the funding to be, if there's services being purchased. So for example, we gave out funds for regeneration to residents. So we set criteria that encourages spending with local businesses. And then obviously we can support through tourism and development as well. And we've been successful with a number of large grants through the Bushfire Local Economic Recovery Fund that will encourage tourism and spending with our local businesses. In social recovery, that comes down to a lot of the work that we're doing to support individuals. So some of that is supporting the not-for-profit organisations in the area and the work that they do, and trying to provide them with funding or resources or knowledge that can help them to deliver services. It's around providing that wellbeing support sometimes ourselves. So Corinne and I do a lot of work going out with residents. So for us ourselves, we try and go out, but we're also trying to link people in with services. So really getting to know our communities, what their needs are, so we can make sure the appropriate service providers and community groups are up and going in our communities, and we can link people in, and that we're communicating and working together as well. Social cohesion is a huge role in how communities recover from disaster. So a community that is well connected and has good social cohesion can bounce back faster. So what we're trying to do is even things like planning events, just to provide some fun and some opportunities for social connection following the natural disaster. And that's been even more critical in this event because of the COVID-19 restrictions. So one of the little things that we did at council that has just been one of the things that I've enjoyed the most is linking our residents in with our community nursery. So there's been a huge amount of grief for our residents with the impact that the fires have had on the natural environment around their properties. And we're now seeing that with the Thornby storm event as well, where people move to Wollondilly because they love the beautiful natural environment, the trees, the plants, the wildlife, and it's something that they're used to having, and it also provides privacy and security around people's blocks as well. So when we have an event like the floods or the fires, it really impacts that natural environment, the wildlife, the ecosystems, and it's really a big source of grief. So it's been nice for us at our nursery to be able to give out some native plants to people to help regenerate their gardens. And we've also tried to do that in partnership with Picton Rotary as well, with giving out some vouchers for some of our local nurseries. So this is one of our very lovely bushfire impacted residents coming down to collect some native plants. Preparedness is obviously a huge part of the community recovery officer role that Corinne and I both do with council. And we are really, I know for me, it's becoming a big focus. We're in bushfire and storm season at the moment. So just trying to get the message out around preparedness. So this was a recent campaign that we did in partnership with the New South Wales RFS, which is around bushfire preparedness, and just some get ready street banners that we developed that we have up in Bargo, Tarmore and Picton. We're hoping to get some more of these banner poles so that we can start to do more community awareness work, and we're looking forward to partnering with the SCS and doing some storm and flood preparedness campaigns as well. We have a mobile recovery and resilience hub project, which we've received funding for, and that will involve outreach work across all the towns of Wollondilly and really providing capacity building and resilience building opportunities. Education around preparedness as well will be a big part of that. And our partnerships with RFS and SES and Red Cross will be critical with projects like that. And as you can see, we're signed up to the Resilience New South Wales Get Ready Council project as well. So we try and share a lot of social media messaging around getting ready for disaster too. Another project that we're very happy to be a part of, which is Resilience New South Wales led, is the disaster dashboard. So Wingecarribee also have a dashboard. So this is a project for us we're about to go live with. We were due to go live 3 weeks, but we've been a little bit, we've shifted really into recovery mode, which has just set us back with launching this. But so our disaster dashboard is something that Resilience New South Wales have developed for councils across New South Wales. And it's designed just to be that one-stop point for information during disaster events. So it draws information automatically from New South Wales SES, New South Wales RFS, Fire and Rescue. So we're not reinventing the wheel. We're not sharing information. We're not having to go out and do our own posts. It's really about creating a central point where people can access to get information directly from the response agencies and those combat agencies like RFS, SES, Fire and Rescue, New South Wales Health, Department of Primary Industries. So this is a project that we're really looking forward to sharing with the community, hopefully in the next 2 weeks. And that will be on our website for everybody to access. It also have live traffic conditions as well. So, and we're just working really to make sure that all those road closure informations that are critical for us. As we all know, during evacuation, during the fires, there was some issues around roads and getting people out quickly. So we want this to be a place where people will hopefully be able to look for that live traffic information and get that really quick information there as well. So they're just a few of the different projects that we're working on from the community recovery officer point of view and in Wollondilly. Wingecarribee are going to share some more information about what they're doing in tomorrow's session as well, which will be really great. But we're really excited to be partnering with the NRRA and Wingecarribee Council and obviously Resilience New South Wales, who support the community recovery officer position and the recovery support service. It's really a team effort in Wollondilly and Wingecarribee to support the community through disaster events in recovery and preparedness work as well. So today's session is really a great opportunity for us to look at our built resilience and how we can build better or build back better or improve our existing properties to make them more fire resistant. So thank you so much to all of our speakers today. The information has been absolutely invaluable, and we really look forward to having this as a resource on our website going forward, because I think it's going to be just invaluable for people who are going through that process.
So if anybody's got any further questions, they can either put them into the chat or they can email them through to either Natalie, Corinne or myself, or just via council, and then we can go back and get those relevant questions answered for you. So thank you again for all our speakers today. Is there anything that any of you would like to include? No, all good. Wonderful. So everybody who has been on today, there is links on the council website to their agencies and their contact details. So you can access all of that information on there. So thank you very much to everybody who's come along today and who's participated and taken part in this. Very much appreciated. Very much appreciated to the Wollondilly IT team who have brought this together as well. So we had a couple of glitches, but that's just normal in this platform now, in this day of life. We're all learning to adapt to things like this. So
thank you, everyone, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you online for our Saturday and Sunday sessions.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you tomorrow morning.
See you all. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.